Our story begins at Longbourn, a modest estate in Hertfordshire, where Mrs. Bennet is desperate to marry off her 5 daughters to wealthy gentlemen. She hears that Mr. Bingley, a rich and handsome young man, has moved into the nearby Netherfield estate. She persuades her husband, Mr. Bennet, to visit him. Mr. Bennet, with his dry sense of humour, doesn't take things too seriously, but finally agrees to meet Mr. Bingley. When Mr. Bennet finally visits Mr. Bingley, he doesn't tell his wife, creating suspense. Mrs. Bennet is thrilled when she later learns of the visit, though she pretends she already knew. The next big event is a ball, where Mr. Bingley is expected to attend. He does, bringing his sisters and his friend, the aloof and proud Mr. Darcy. At the ball, Mr. Bingley is charming and dances with Jane, showing clear interest in her. But Mr. Darcy, though handsome and wealthy, comes off as arrogant and rude. Lizzie overhears Mr. Darcy telling Mr. Bingley that Jane isn't pretty enough for him and is offended. She vows to never like him. As the days go by, Jane and Mr. Bingley grow closer, but Mr. Darcy seems to be taking an unusual interest in Lizzie, even though she doesn't like him. Lizzie's suspicions about Darcy's character continue to grow, and she doesn't trust him. Meanwhile, Jane is enjoying Mr. Bingley's attention, though she's unaware of Darcy's disapproval of her. Things get a bit awkward when Lizzie overhears more of Darcy's critical remarks, and he begins acting strangely around her. Instead of talking to her directly, he lurks around, making Lizzie uncomfortable. At a party at Sir William Lucas's house, Lizzie tries to brush off Darcy's attention, and her friend Charlotte suggests she play the piano to escape. Darcy, noticing her, grows intrigued. Later, Lizzie's younger sisters Lydia and Kitty become excited about a group of soldiers arriving in the neighbourhood, but their father is not impressed. Meanwhile, Jane gets an invitation to dinner at Netherfield from Miss Bingley. Mrs. Bennet encourages her to take a horse, knowing it will rain and force Jane to stay overnight. Sure enough, Jane catches a cold and stays at Netherfield, leaving Lizzie worried. Determined to help, Lizzie walks through the rain to check on Jane, looking a mess by the time she arrives. The Bingley sisters are horrified by her muddy appearance, but Mr. Darcy notices how determined and strong-willed Lizzie is, which starts to change his opinion of her. Lizzie stays the night at Netherfield to look after Jane, and as we end this section, we're left wondering if Jane will recover, and if Mr. Darcy will admit his growing feelings for Lizzie.